All right, we're bringing Adrian back. Adrian, do you think markets are overreacting to Trump's offhand political comments, or is this volatility justified based on his past influence over Bitcoin policy?
I think that one thing that investors should be aware of is that markets move on sentiment, and the president of the largest economy in the world will likely have a disproportionate impact on markets depending on the way he chooses his words. And that's not me getting political or anything like that. That's just me highlighting the facts of the matter. And I also think that just given what we've seen in the markets this year, we had that brief tariff Armageddon. We had the situation with, Israel bombing Iran and vice versa. We have the ongoing situation with Russia and Ukraine. We have a lot of different macroeconomic and geopolitical events that are perhaps exerting some sway on the markets. And I think right now the market is just looking for a clear eye forward. And that can come in the form of a set guidance around tariffs, because I don't think that the plan is steady state just yet. And I also think that could be playing into why the Fed hasn't cut interest rates just yet. But in this kind of a market, any sort of sentimental commentary or shift will have a disproportionate reaction. So this is just a dip. I don't really think it's a signal of anything structural or anything more significant. I just think that the markets are doing what they do and they react on sentiment, and we're seeing it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, love him or hate him, right? Trump has been arguably Bitcoin's most powerful political ally, at least this year. And if he's out in 2028, what do you think happens to the crypto president narrative, and does it weaken the Bitcoin bull case politically as we move forward?
Well, in 2028, I don't know if any candidates for either party, whether Democrat or Republican, can come out against Bitcoin at this point. We have too much corporate adoption. We have BlackRock, we have Fidelity, we have just a fundamentally different view on Bitcoin overall. And I'm not sure if any political candidate would want to take on derailing that. So, granted, I could be jinxing this by saying that, but I do think that in 2028, I don't think that Bitcoin is going to face any significant political headwinds, at least in terms of the United States presidential election. So, um, at that point, it just becomes, are there going to be someone that's bullish like Trump? So are there going to be someone from Trump's cabinet? Is it going to be the vice president? Is it going to be Vivek Ramaswamy? Is it going to be someone like that? Or is it going to be someone from the Democratic Party that highlights themselves as an ally towards cryptocurrencies? I think, and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, because Bitcoin and crypto are not the same thing. Um, I do believe that the Warrens and the Genslers of the world are pretty much done in terms of political discourse when it comes to swaying the discourse in Washington around Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So I think the future is bright for Bitcoin. I don't know if anyone politically can derail it, really.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think we're at a point where we are in too deep. There's too much institutional money, therefore too much influence across the board for anyone to just truly ignore Bitcoin going forward. So I think whether people like it or not, it is here to stay regardless of who is running for office in 2028. And kind of to your point, are we relying on political figures as a sign? Excuse me. So at this stage, regardless of who is in office next, do you feel like the fact that we're kind of relying on political figures as a sign of what could or could not be coming next kind of indicate that the space itself still lacks the true independence that Bitcoin is all about? Or was this always going to kind of happen naturally anyways as Bitcoin gains a stronger foothold in our financial ecosystem?
I don't know if Bitcoin is relying on politics. If we go back to Bitcoin's inception to now, Bitcoin crossed 1 trillion market cap with politicians fighting it the entire way. So I think what we're seeing right now is what's happening in the space is that Bitcoiners, or rather the general discourse coming from Bitcoiners, seem more supportive towards politicians because they're finally not fighting us, right? So I don't know if we're relying on politicians. I think that it could be that the space is embracing that the political process is going to be part of Bitcoin's growth, and they're seeking to not obfuscate it further because it's already been obfuscated for 15 years, right? So right now, I
Right.
think we want to get into this next 15 years where we say, okay, fine. The politicians are here. They've been fighting us. They want in. Let's move forward. That's kind of the overall view that I have on what's happening. Um, in terms of what's going on with or without politicians, like we just highlighted and you just highlighted, I hate to keep using the same adage, but nothing stops this train. Bitcoin's going to move forward. Larry Fink,
Hmm.
as I call him, Uncle Larry,
Right.
did not get into this to have politicians dissuade him from his path. So I think that once the BlackRock ETF got approved, and we've been seeing the inflows and we've been seeing the growth, that was pretty much a death knell for any kind of political opposition, in my view. So I think Bitcoiners are just embracing the process. There's some that are still very, very vocal against it, to be expected. But quite frankly, I don't know if we're relying on politicians. I think we're just embracing the fact that they're part of the process. So yeah, it's this is we're going to go up and to the right is basically what I think. So I don't think anything really stops it right now, and I don't think we need the politicians. I think the politicians are just now along for the ride.
Yeah, but I think there's something to be said, as we've seen with Trump. The right person or people could certainly accelerate the Bitcoin adoption process. I just out of curiosity, from your seat at the table, is there anyone that you're kind of looking at now that maybe in 2028 you'd be like, I could see them maybe pushing the Bitcoin play even further? Who's maybe an advocate? You said like Vivek, for instance, or maybe there's some others. Is there anyone else maybe you'd like to see get into the mix because you think they'd be good for the Bitcoin ecosystem and adoption as we move forward to the end of the rest of this decade?
I'm reluctant to give endorsements for any candidate. So
Yeah, no worries.
I was okay with Trump because I thought he'd be pro Bitcoin. But the pushback I would
Yeah.
give is that I don't think Trump has accelerated anything. I think that this
Mm.
was going to happen and the market was going to do what it was going to do, regardless of whether it was going to be Trump or Kamala Harris. And I say that, and I may
Hmm.
aggravate people by saying it, because we had the SBR, that move forward. Nothing's really happened with that. We've had
True.
legislation that's kind of cleared some roadblocks in terms of stable coins, in terms of maybe banks custodying Bitcoin, in terms of broader adoption, sure. But I don't know if that's a function of Trump as much as, like I said, it's a function of what the market wants. The reality of it is that if we had another Biden term, could he have tried to obfuscate? Sure. Would he have won? I don't think so. I think that he would have likely faced staunch opposition to his opposition, or whether it would be Harris or whomever. So I don't want to put this at the feet of any one political candidate saying that they are pushing things forward. I think it just seems that way because Trump is the first candidate that hasn't been directly obfuscating Bitcoin's progress. But I also like to point out that this is, again, the reason why I say it's the market getting what the market wants is because people just love to forget that Trump was vehemently anti-Bitcoin and said he wanted to kill it in his last presidency. So this turn of phrase right now, I think, is a representation of what the market wants, not so much what Trump actually thinks. So that said, going forward, could Vivek be a good candidate? Perhaps. Could there be a Democratic candidate that comes forward that would provide a boost to the narrative, perhaps. But again, I don't think we are reliant on any one politician from any one party. This is moving forward, and it's just a matter of what politician is going to get on the train and what politician is going to be trying to derail it. And I don't think any politician right now is going to actively try to derail it, and I don't think they'll have any success if they did.
All right, we're bringing Adrian back. Adrian, some are calling Bitcoin's low volatility a sign of market maturity. Others say it's a calm before the storm. What's your take?
I think as a sign of market maturity, as assets grow, they tend to get more stable rather than more volatile. I think if you take a look at from the time that the BlackRock ETF was approved, that all the ETFs rather were approved, Bitcoin's volatility has been kind of ticking downward. And that is a representation of a maturing market in my view. If we go back to what gold did when the gold ETFs were launched, it kind of went stair-stepped up and to the right for like 8 years or something like that. Don't quote me on that figure, but it was something along those lines. And I think we have a similar future in store for Bitcoin. Are we going to be seeing the 80% drawdowns? I don't think so. Are we going to be seeing the 6 and 7x run-ups? I don't think so. And that is, again, not so much a statement to the volatility But I think a fact that goes often unmentioned or unrealized is that this is the first cycle where Bitcoin is experiencing a market that doesn't have near zero interest rates or broad stimulus coming from the government. From Bitcoin's inception in 2009 all the way through to 2022, it was experiencing near zero interest rates. It was experiencing government stimulus that entire way through. So the boom bust cycles we saw, I think, are more a function of that stimulus rather than some kind of inherent cycle driven narrative that must happen fait accompli with Bitcoin. So if you think about it, liquidity seeks quality while stimulus seeks speculation. What we're seeing right now is liquidity seeking quality, and that is why Bitcoin has been seeing its run up since, in my view, the ETFs have launched. If we had stimulus, I think we'd be seeing a similar cycle dynamic play out. And I think that bears out by the general trends we saw with Ethereum. It took a longer while for Ethereum to get that institutional bid, but now we're seeing that it's going up. But if we look at the altcoin market, there's so many altcoins right now that the hype train has been diluted. And because there's not stimulus, there's less frenzy. Sure, some altcoins are seeing returns, but it's nowhere near what I saw in in the previous two cycles. In those previous two cycles, I can close my eyes and throw a dart at a board and pick an altcoin and make money. That is not what's happening now. So the reality of it is a maturing market is happening in tandem with growing liquidity without stimulus in a higher interest rate environment. If that doesn't scream a maturing market to people, I don't know what does. So I think we stair step up and to the right over the next several decades. And what's going to really likely happen is that many, for lack of a better term, tourists are going to get very, very frustrated, expecting Bitcoin to rip to $500,000 and so they can get out. And quite frankly, I think that's for the best. I think that what we will see in terms of broad adoption is better served by Bitcoin showing stability versus the boom bust cycles we've seen in the past. Also, another piece of that puzzle is that because of the corporate adoption, so whether that be from strategy or institutional adoption from BlackRock, the cycle is going to play out different. I don't even know if we're going to have a cycle. And I say that because previous cycles, because of that stimulus effect I've been discussing, that boom bust effect, what happens is people go into Bitcoin, Bitcoin runs up, then they go into altcoins, altcoins run further because of the lower market cap and the ability for money to move those markets, and then everyone leaves, and then the market crashes. Right now, what we're seeing is institutions issuing equity and raising capital to buy Bitcoin, and all they're doing with the increase in stock price is rotating that back into more Bitcoin. So that capital rotation effect is going to be very, very muted. And I think that the participants in the market right now are disincentivized to sell. Someone holding the BlackRock ETF or the Fidelity ETF for Bitcoin is not going to rotate from Bitcoin into Fartcoin or Pepe or Dog with Hat or whatever other meme coins we have in the cycle. So it's a fundamentally different investor base. I think retail right now is being largely represented by the Bitcoin treasury companies and the large run up we're seeing in those. And those are essentially acting like the altcoins this cycle. So by and large, what we're seeing is just a very, very large and diversified Bitcoin cycle playing out right now. And sorry, that was a very, very long answer, but those are just my general thoughts.
No, the long answers we're here for it. And you made a really nice phrasing. I don't know if you've coined this or not. So liquidity seeks quality, stimulus seeks speculation. Did you coin that, or is that like a known phrase? Because that was the first time I've heard of that.
That's something I say. I don't know if someone said it before, but that's just something
Oh, I
that
got to put
I
that on a
say.
shirt. I like that. That was good. And you brought up some really interesting points there. We talked about the lack of, you said like, that's been a big narrative this cycle, is are we going to be seeing these same cycles as we had seen them in the past? Bitwise CIO Matt Hogan has come straight out and said he doesn't think we're going to be seeing cycles in the same way going forward. Do you think that is in part because retail isn't buying into these altcoins the same way, because they would usually carve that froth off the top of the high Bitcoin price, chase those high alpha plays, but now we're seeing all of this institutional adoption, and I don't think MicroStrategy is going to be selling at the top of their Bitcoin earnings to be putting anything in Pepe coin. So do you think that things like that, the institutional plays, the ETFs, the macro clarity, the regulatory structure, are those the things that are actively suppressing the volatility right now and going forward?
Yes, I think that they are feeding the growth and simultaneously suppressing the volatility. Now, we can touch on a few points that you just made. Anyone that researches Michael Saylor, he's not selling. He is a very, very seasoned, battle-tested investor in in these markets, and he did not get into Bitcoin to sell at the top. So that's not happening, and that's over 600,000 Bitcoin right there. BlackRock, Fidelity, together, I think they hold over like 800,000 or something like that. They're representing their clients, and their client base is not seeking frenzy. They're seeking quality, right? They're not seeking speculation. They're seeking quality. So yes, I do think so. And I also think that, ironically enough, the success that strategy had last cycle, so when they adopted the Bitcoin Treasury strategy, they went from 1 billion market cap now to over 100 billion market cap. That success is what's fueling Bitcoin Treasury adoption now. And we're seeing the net result of that in the fact of all the corporate adoption. The Bitcoin Treasury companies, in my view, have sucked a lot of the frenzy that we have seen in altcoins away from the altcoin market. And retail investors are piling in to these treasury companies, and they have very, very vibrant communities. You have Semler Scientific, Metaplanet, Smarter Web, Capital. You have so many different companies right now. Those are just some of the primary ones that I've mentioned. Those aren't all of them. There's over 100 of them that are attracting retail interests and also simultaneously attracting institutional interests as well. And what's ironic about this is the treasury companies attracting retail investors make it less likely for the retail investors to rotate into altcoins. They know that Bitcoin is what's fueling the treasury adoption phase, and they know that the volatility in Bitcoin and the associated volatility with the equities is what's fueling the disproportionate run up, right? All that sentiment, or rather, they should understand its sentiment because it really is this what sentiment is what's driving this. So when they rotate all of those coins, they're either going to rotate, in my view, into cash or into Bitcoin. I don't think they're going to chase pumps in altcoins after the fact, mostly just based on what I'm hearing.
Right.
Because when you talk to people, when you see them post on Twitter, they're posting about these treasury companies, but they're posting about Bitcoin as well. They're becoming, ironically enough, more indoctrinated into Bitcoin the further they go into these treasury companies. So it's kind of this recursive
Yeah.
sentimental feedback loop that's happening, and they're getting orange pilled by going into Bitcoin through equities. So yeah, this is going to be a fundamentally different cycle. This is not going to be a boom bust cycle in my view. Are we going to see corrections? Yes. I just don't think that as Saylor said, I don't think winter's coming again. We're going to see the 20%, 30%, sure. But the massive drawdowns of the past, I don't think those are going to happen.